Okay, I will open up the doors.
All righty.
Great. Hello, everyone. Welcome in. Happy to have everybody.
Hey, everyone. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Give everybody a second to just get their audio set. As always, if you feel like coming off of mute in those videos, we always love to see your faces, but certainly not required.
You may also want to check your participant name if you want to. If we're going to call you by name, then whatever name you'd like for us to call you by is the name you need to have on your Zoom session. So that's kind of how we know names and stuff. So
Righto.
Might want to double check that and update it if you want.
All right, so it looks like everyone is about settled. So welcome everyone. Welcome to our weekly AMA office hours. Today we have Pragmatic instructor Steve Gaylor. Hey, Steve.
Hey.
Thanks for being with us. So we'll get started, but before we do that, let's do a quick plug for our Pragmatic alumni community. This is one of our newest offerings. It is our members only group loaded with tons of fantastic resources. We have our peer-to-peer engagement, our huge curated library of resources. And I have a quote here from one of our members. This is from a senior product manager at a Fortune 500 company who shares, being part of the pack has all the benefits that come with participating in a professional organization, including networking opportunities, professional development, and access to exclusive online resources provided by Pragmatic. All of this has helped refresh and reinforce training I've received. So definitely be sure to check that out. You guys can head over to pragmatic.com/community. And we now are still offering 30% off that list price. So be sure to check that out. Before we get rolling, just a reminder that we have had questions submitted prior to. Feel free to share your questions as well. We want to make sure we love to engage with the folks who join us each and every week. So you're welcome to put those questions in the chat, or you can send them to me personally. But we certainly love to hear from you. So, all right, Steve, shall we get started?
I'm ready to roll whenever you are, Kelly.
All right, let's do it. So our first question comes from Jenny. This one is regarding win-loss. So Jenny says, I'm trying to implement a win-loss program at my company. We are a smaller company that offers raw materials for different industries and sells direct and through distribution. Should I be doing win-loss analysis with our distributors' accounts? And if so, what are some recommendations on how to go about it?
Yeah, so great question, Jenny. That's a situation we like to call a multi-level sales channel. So it sounds like you have both direct and indirect. You've got one side that's your direct sales channel, and then on the indirect side is really where that multi-level kind of thing comes into play. And the short answer to your question is yes, you need to do win-loss analysis with those customers that are going through your channel as well. They may have different experiences, they may have different issues, all kinds of things that you might uncover. Of course, there's going to be some commonality with those that go through your direct channel as well, but you've got to do some win-loss with that indirect channel. And you don't say it directly in your question and the way you've asked your question, but I think what you didn't say was, sometimes my channel won't let me have access to those customers, right? They're their customers, they want to hold them tight, and if there's anything that I need to know about those channel customers, just let the channel partner know, and they'll tell me whatever they need to know, right? So sometimes they have that kind of opinion, that kind of impression. So sometimes you have to get creative and go around the channel. We at Pragmatic had a customer one time who sold video gaming machines, gambling machines that were video games for gambling. And they had a situation where they were trying to get that input from the end user. Their sales had been really good. They were the market leader. And then some issues started to arise. They weren't really sure what, but their portion market share was starting to decline, and they went to the casinos who were buying the machines and saying, yeah, no, everything's good. We're all good. Everything's great. And in the meantime, their share continued to decline, and they were building up physical inventory, which caused problems. And so they actually put together a program they called Beat the Casino. So they put together a series of seminars around the country in cities where casinos were located. And they put on a seminar, invited people in to come learn how to beat the casinos and so on. And they learned through that. So when they invited those people in, the morning session was kind of, different gaming strategies and stuff like that. And then over lunch, they would provide lunch and had their various machines, their gaming machines around the perimeter of the room. And they asked people or invited people to play those games and so on. And what they learned through that process was the number one thing that drove a person to choose the game that they wanted to play was the branding on that game. So Deal or No Deal or Wheel of Fortune or Biggest Loser, probably not the best example for that kind of game, but that was what was really driving them. And as the market leader, they had dropped a lot of their third-party branding kind of relationships. And once they put those seminars on, then they discovered what was really driving that behavior. They re-upped their branding. And once again, people started to play their machines, and therefore they were pulled through the channel. So sometimes you have to be creative and kind of get that feedback from the end. So you have to go around the channel. Maybe you can do some educational webinars and invite people in to join those and, see what you can find out, see what you can learn from them, those kinds of things. But you do definitely need to get feedback. If you can do win-loss, that's great. If you can get the channel to participate and allow you to have that win-loss. Another thing I would say, and this is true both of your direct sales team and that channel, you need to reinforce with them why you want to do win-loss. You're doing win-loss not to judge their ability to sell or manage the sales team. The reason you're doing that win-loss is so you can help mitigate issues that are making it difficult for them to sell. You want to try to find out how and why people are buying and things of that nature. So just reinforce that with your sales team. You're not there to judge their selling ability or their account management skills or anything like that. It really is all about being able to understand what's causing issues in the channel and being able to address those issues. So sometimes they need that little bit of reinforcement to allow you to have access.
Yeah, and Steve, you brought up a good point about how sometimes people want to hold tight, right? They want to hold tight to their clients or their customers, and it's hard to get access to do that. I mean, do you have any suggestions or ways to go about having that conversation to sort of, get access to these people that might be hard to attain?
Yeah, as I say, the biggest thing, you have to put yourself in their shoes and say, okay, why won't they let me have access? Well, they're worried about me messing up a sales deal that's active. So just tell them, if you've got an active sales situation in there, I don't want to talk to them. I only want to talk to them once they've made that decision, right? If they've elected to go with us or not go with our product, whether it's a direct or indirect. I don't, if you got an active sales deal going on, I don't want in there, right? So reinforce that with them. If they don't want to allow you access because they're concerned that you're going to go tell others that tell their management that they're not good at account management. That's not what we're trying to do, right? That's not the purpose for the call at all. And so just think about it, put yourself in their shoes, think about why you're receiving that resistance, and then see what you can do to address that resistance. Usually it's because I don't want you messing up my account. I don't want you to ruin the relationship. I don't want you judging my sales abilities. And, those are probably the top 3 or 4. But just ask them, why not, right? And then see how you can address that.
Yeah, absolutely. And to those of you who are just joining us, welcome. Happy to have you. Feel free to put your questions in the chat at any time. You can send them to me, you can send them to the group. But in the meantime, let's take Sam's question. Sam asks, what are some key things to keep in mind when designing a new product? We don't have many competitors in this space, so the world is our oyster. But I want to be sure that we're maintaining focus and making sure that we're keeping the most important components top of mind.
Okay, so I've got a new product that I'm taking to market. What are the things I need to keep kind of front in mind in order to go make sure I have a successful product in the market? I would be extremely remiss given the company that I work for if my first part of the answer to that question wasn't make sure you're focusing on market problems, right? Make sure you've identified problems that the folks have that are in the market, and the things that you're building, the things you're designing are addressing those market problems. So that's first and foremost. I can't really tell from the way the question was phrased if it's, what should we focus on, or if it really is, they use the term design. If they're truly talking about design, then I think you want to make sure, again, that the features you're designing, the things you're building into the product are addressing problems in the market. And you should also think about the personas whose problems you're solving, so that typical representation of what you expect to be a statistically significant user of your products. That can be a little bit of a challenge, especially with new products, because we've done our market research and we've got an idea of who these people are and what we expect them to do with the product, the problems we expect to solve, but we don't yet have that experience to know for sure. But go build those personas and make sure you're not designing, your engineers aren't designing for themselves. Make sure that you're not designing for yourself. Those personas are very important because they help us understand who it is we're trying to delight. They allow us to recognize that personas may be different to one another. We may have different types of users, different classes of users, if you will. Those different users may be different to one another. They certainly may be different to us, and they may be different to the people who are solving those problems. So make sure that your engineers are not designing, or your designers are not designing for themselves or designing for you as a product lead. We're designing for the people who are in the market. So make sure you cultivate those people. You're iterating on those designs. You're getting feedback on the designs to make sure you're creating a product that the market wants to embrace, right? Something people want to buy and use.
Yeah, and it seems like it's fairly new. There's no competitors in this space. I mean, do you have any suggestions for how to develop these personas?
Yeah, certainly from a persona development perspective, it's all about getting into the market. As you've been out in the market, physically before, virtually now, hopefully as you're identifying the problems that you're going to go solve, the problems that are experienced by the market, you're also taking that opportunity to capture some information around the people who are experiencing those problems, right? Their age, their years of experience, how do they spend their day? How do they, how do you expect them to interact with your product? How do you expect them to use it, kind of thing. So certainly that persona development early on with a brand new product should be heavily swayed by those Nihito visits that you've done, perhaps some validation that you've done as a part of the discovery and validation process of market research. But you've got to get out and talk to people. And it really depends on the nature of the product. Sometimes I think about that people forget about friends and family, especially if you're, have a consumer product. We forget our friends or our family might be good candidates for this or be able to give us feedback. Maybe if you've got friends in industry. I certainly have had a number of people that I've worked with in the past. They've moved on to new companies, new opportunities, but they know that we can all share ideas with one another and get feedback and validate some of the things we're hearing and so on. So get out there in the market, but also don't forget the people that are around you all the time that could be potentials for feedback as well.
Great. All right. Angela writes in next. Angela says, what are some tips for handling difficult clients? We recently cut our sales team by half due to COVID, which has caused several of our PMs to now be front and center with buyers who were either misinformed or overpromised. How can we provide the damage control we so desperately need? I bet that there's a lot of folks kind of going through some similar stuff here, I would imagine. Yeah.
So I think probably this whole COVID situation is certainly compounded some of that. Certainly this situation it sounds like the product team is front and center from a support perspective really now based on some turnover that has been caused in the sales team. I think, and I have spent time, just full disclosure here, I spent time in engineering and sales engineering and in customer support and in implementations. So I have seen kind of all angles of that piece, right? Presenting the information, setting the expectations, then having to be around to actually implement and meet those expectations. And then, you know, on the customer support front, where we were quite honestly, a couple of companies that I worked where we had some pretty big customer support issues that we had to work through. And I think the best guidance I would give you in that situation is don't, and I don't know the most polite way to say this, don't ignore those people. They are unhappy. Their expectations are what they are. It's not their fault in most cases that they have expectations that aren't in line with reality, I guess. Even if their expectations aren't in line, if it is their fault that those expectations aren't in line, you're not going to be able to convince them of that. So the critical first step is listening to them. Let them express themselves, express their frustration, express their feeling of you know, having been misled in many cases, right? And have that very first conversation in no way at all should be defensive. In no way at all should be, but, or I'm sorry that, you know, that's not true. Let them speak first. Let them share their frustrations. Let them get that off their chest, and then recognize and say, okay, that's great feedback. I'm sorry we're in that situation. I appreciate the position we've put you in, but now let's work out how we can move forward. Right? Here's where your expectations misaligned. We don't do that, but we do this. I'm sorry that you know, you're in the position you're in. Let's work to see what we can do to correct that. I think far too often those are hard discussions, right? They're uncomfortable discussions. They are difficult discussions. They are discussions we probably would rather not have. I never signed up for, you know, hey, take me to the most upset customer we got so I can spend some time with them. I mean, that wasn't a task I was raising my hand for, but you can't turn them around until you listen to them first. So let them get it out, let them express it, put yourself in their shoes, have empathy for their situation, and then recognize that it's probably not their fault in that situation, and then see how you can collectively work with them to.
Did we lose you, Steve? Technical difficulties. Let's see if we can give it a minute here.
Yeah, it looks like he's frozen.
Let's see if he's getting chat so we can tell him. Hi, Leica, how are you?
Good, how are you doing?
Good, happy Friday. I saw you got a lot of stuff going on in the pack. We love to hear from you there.
Oh yeah, well, I figured, you know, that's why you guys created it. I'll participate.
Absolutely. No, and it's so great too, because we've been growing like exponentially. I think like in the last 40 days, we've been like, you know, grown like 35, 40%. So it's awesome to see how many, you know, talented individuals are really exchanging.
Cool.
Steve is back. Slightly. Steve, you're on mute.
All right, sorry about that. My laptop finally suddenly decided that it was done working on Fridays. It's Friday afternoon. I'm done. I'm out of here. So
Taking a half day on you.
Apologies. I want to work my magic again. Here goes my magic trick. Now I'm not orange anymore.
No, but just to get back into our discussion, I mean, I think you make a really good point. I think that people really want to be heard, and that kind of goes a long way. Like, even though it is an uncomfortable situation, and then it's also just to have, you know, problem solving conversations, right? Like, we could dwell on the problem, but it's like, you know, let's forge forward to how we're going to fix it. Not what is, but what will be, right?
Yeah, and you'll never have the chance to have that opportunity. You'll never have the opportunity to have that discussion until you allow them to vet first and you know, get out of that defensive kind of, you know, angry or whatever term you want to use to describe that situation. You won't get to move forward until you first listen to that.
Great. So we have this next one who asks about naming a product. So this one comes from Jackie, and she asks, is there a process to help us when selecting names for new products and major features? Is there a framework or a template for this? Looking to cover items such as how to generate name ideas, collect feedback from stakeholders, check that they're not being used elsewhere, and where to best gain final approval. That's a loaded one.
Yeah. That one's interesting because, sorry, what was the name on that?
It's from Jackie North.
Jackie. So Jackie has definitely, I think, fallen into some of the traps and put into the discussion. I don't have a specific methodology or process or structure that you can follow. I think the first thing you need to recognize is who owns naming at a company. And you ask that question, who owns naming at a company, you'll get answers like marketing communications or product marketing or the executive team or all that kind of stuff. None of those are correct. Legal owns naming, because it's not until you can get the trademarks and you can get all that kind of stuff that you've actually got a name that you can use in the market. So start with that recognize that, kind of the last thing or one of the end of the things that the submitter talked about, that Jackie talked about, was, getting the trademarks and all that kind of stuff, get that final approval. I do have some kind of tips, some things to think about when you're going through the naming process. And it doesn't really matter who owns, quote, owns naming or who's coming up with the name. The first bit of guidance we like to give is that any name that you have for a product or a feature should be a meaningful name. It should represent the problems you're trying to solve. I was teaching a class one time and we kind of talked about that, right? Have a meaningful name, reflects what the problems we're trying to solve with the product. And one of the students spoke up, and I guess she'd had a younger child that she was raising, and she said, "Do you mean like potty watch?" And I said, "Well, maybe. What's a potty watch do?" And she said, "Well, it's a timer when it's time for a little kid to when you're doing potty training." And she said she'd actually gone out and searched on Google for a potty watch, and there was a product that came back whose name was Potty Watch. I mean, it was exactly what she wanted. So that's one of the things that if you can get a name that reflects what somebody would type into a search engine and find you, then that's going to be a good name, right? That's really going to be a good, meaningful name. However, sometimes it's difficult to be able to get those trademarks on meaningful names. It's hard to get the URLs sometimes associated with meaningful names. So sometimes we have to go with unique names, right? So things that are, kind of made up names, you might say, in a way. Just recognize if you use one of those other names, other kinds of names, you're going to have to spend more time and more money burning that name into the mind of the market, right? You're going to spend more money on advertising so people can find you. You're going to have to spend more money creating awareness, right? Just because you don't have that meaningful name. I remember when Accenture, broke out from Anderson and first started as a completely separate business arm. I would hate to think how much money that Accenture spent trying to teach me how to spell Accenture, right? But they spent all that money. I know now how to spell it. And, a very prominent firm, and one that's kind of top of mind when we're thinking about those kinds of services. So meaningful names, if you can. If you can't use meaningful names, then just recognize it's going to be more time, more expensive to go with an alternative name. Other things to watch out for, be careful of project names. Sometimes we lose control of our product name when a project name gets out into the market. One time we had a brand new product. We were building this huge, massive, multi-million-dollar product when we finished it. Each sale was well over $1 million. And we were talking about it as a replacement for some existing technology. And it was really a big focus for the company. And the internal name for that project was something we called Rainmaker, was the name of the project. It's a big deal, big future, bet the company future kind of thing. And so we were calling it Rainmaker. And I was giving a presentation at a users conference one time. And we were talking about future vision and what was going on. And this customer stood up, raised their hand, asked a question, big kind of hall auditorium, and said, what's this rainmaker thing we keep hearing about? Why do you call it rainmaker? And of course, my first inclination was, well, we're calling it rainmaker because we expect to make a boatload of money off of it, right? But you couldn't have that conversation in that environment. So we have to be kind of careful of those project names. They'll leak into the market. Watch out for three-letter acronyms. I don't believe I've ever worked with a company who is more enamored with three-letter acronyms than Pragmatic. We got the PAC, and we've got AMA, and we've got the ARC, and right, all those kinds of things. Watch out for those three-letter acronyms for a couple of reasons. Number one, they don't work very well in search engines. You go enter AMA into a search engine, and I'll bet that this session is not the first thing that shows up, right? So they don't work very well in search engines. They also increase the likelihood of creating a name that's an offensive term in another language. So if you're global, if you're multilingual, those kinds of issues really begin to come into play as well. So some more, tips, kind of things to watch out for.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, I think one of those great examples, for the naming is like Uber versus Lyft, right? Like they probably spent so much more money, Uber, getting us to understand that it was actually, a car service, right? So I think that that's really good advice. And actually, Frank, who's on the call with us, has a really good follow-up question to this. To avoid the project name adoption, should product or marketing name begin with the start of the new product or new feature product?
I'm sorry, Callie, can you repeat that one again?
Yeah, I'll repeat that. And Frank, feel free to come off.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is Frank. Just wondered if it makes sense to start thinking about a new product or new feature name as the project name gets kicked off. So you avoid the project name leaking into the or becoming the product name. When is there a good time to start that process?
Yeah, that's a great question, Frank. I would certainly start it fairly early, as long as I have a good idea, a good understanding of what the intent of the product or the feature is, so I can create that meaningful name. I don't want to replace the project name with the proposed product name yet, because when we send it off over to the legal guys, who knows what might come back from the legal team with regards to trademarks and all that kind of stuff, branding and so on. So it is something that needs to be taken care of, and it does need to be initiated early, primarily because that legal process can take a long time. But don't try to replace the project name with the product name before you get ready to launch that product to market. To avoid project names getting into the market, I liked names like hamburger, or, all the different Google Android operating releases, they named them after desserts kind of thing for a long time. And then you'd see them replaced with the actual name once they got close to market. So I always name my projects after things like that. We've got one instructor that said he always liked to name his projects after diseases, and that kept him from getting into the market. He said, made for some great T-shirts. I survived Project Influenza, kind of thing. So, whatever floats of it. But think about it. What gives you the least chance of that project name ever being used and getting out into the market?
Very helpful, very amusing too. Thank you.
Good.
All right. So this next one comes from Tara. It's interesting. We've seemed to have a lot of people that are transitioning into to new industries now. And I think probably, with the pandemic, it's certainly a time to rethink, our futures, right? But Tara asks, I'm looking to transition from the tech industry into product management. I was curious, in your opinion, what you felt the most important skills are that I should be finessing to make the transition successful, and what to plug in my interview that'll help me seal the gig.
Okay. So great question. Transition from a technology kind of background into product. Some of the specific skills that I think are really, really important in product. And I think this is no matter where you're coming from, right? These are some of the big things. First of all, you have to have really good listening skills. You can develop those. You have to have good interviewing skills so you can, capture that information from the market. Again, those kinds of things can be developed, right? But you can, you can work on that. You can polish that, those kinds of things. You have to have good analytical skills. Because depending on the role and the responsibilities, you may be responsible for P&L, you may be responsible for understanding things like utilization and various metrics and all kinds of things like that. So I'm not saying you necessarily have to be mathematical. There are certainly been a lot of instructors, or I'm sorry, I was thinking about instructors. We have some instructors that are not very mathematical that have been very, very successful in product. That was kind of a Freudian slip there. I've got a couple of names in mind, but you don't have to be mathematical, but you do need to be curious. You need to be analytical. You also have to have good presentation skills. You're going to be at the front of the room. Oftentimes, the first market you have to convince is your executive team. You've got to be able to sell to those people. You've got to be able to convince your sales team that these things that you're creating for them to sell are going to be successful. You're going to be presenting in maybe industry conferences. You're going to be presenting in users conferences and things like that. So those communication skills, those presentation skills are all going to be extremely important, extremely valuable. And we also do an annual survey, and I think it's ongoing. It's either underway right now or just about to launch this year's survey. And one of the things that comes out of that survey are what are some of the skills. So that we ask the survey participants, what are some of the skills that they believe that they have or are most valuable to them, and so on. And so that's another great resource for you. If you go out to our website, you'll find those previous year's survey results are out there, and you can see what others are saying. I always thought one of the biggest things that we have responsibility for in the product team that for some people is one of the most difficult things to go do is that truth to management responsibility, right? You're going to find things that are not just right. You're going to find situations where maybe an executive is giving you a stretch goal. You're going to find situations where the executive or some other member of the team says, wow, I think this is a great idea. Let's go do it. And you've got to be able to do the research and come back and say, well, market says something different, right? So that truth to management, that truth to leadership is a big deal. So just recognize that's something you're signing up for as well. In that interview, the second part of that question, what skills can you highlight? If you've got good, strong if you have good, strong communication skills, which clearly I don't at the moment, then you need to highlight that. Verbal skills, written skills, presentation skills. That's one that's pretty straightforward to be able to highlight in an interview. And honestly, when I'm interviewing people, or was interviewing people for those kinds of positions, that was one of the things I was gauging. Could they communicate an idea? Could they share, a story? Could they tell me a story kind of thing? Because that's a big part of what we do in that product team. And that's one of the big things that's different from maybe that technology background.
Yeah. And Steve, talking about, on your hires, were there any other maybe attributes that you looked for in the folks that you wanted on your team when you were hiring?
Well, I always, and I think this is probably true of any role you're hiring too. I wanted, and these kinds of things are so repeated that they're almost a cliche now, but I wanted people who recognize the difference between a team and an individual. Together, we're going to succeed. Together, we're all going to move forward. And if it's all about you, then it's going to be difficult for you to be successful on our team. I mean, because that was a very important thing to me, was that we had team members. We didn't have a lot of individuals, right? It wasn't a big deal. So that recognition of the team, the desire to support the team, the recognition that it takes a team to deliver these successful products or deliver these activities, all those kinds of things. So the ability to work together. Another big skill, which I didn't mention, that's also a part of this teaming kind of environment, is the recognition that in this product role, your responsibility is to influence lots and lots of people. Unfortunately, none of those people report to you, right? So you don't have that direct line of influence, and that can be a big issue. People sometimes ask me what experience I had prior to coming to a product role that served me very well, that was most valuable to me. And I actually spent some time working on some international design committees within the auspices of the UN. So I was sitting in UN discussions and debates and all that kind of stuff, you know. And the ability to influence people who had no reporting relationship to me, who had no, in many instances, no cultural relationship to me at all, right? We were all from different countries and different backgrounds and things like that. But that ability to listen and have the discussion, foster the discussion, but influence the discussion as well, was a very valuable kind of experience that I had. And unfortunately, that specific experience is one that most people don't get to have. But that ability to influence and the ability to listen and then guide the conversation is very valuable as well.
Yeah, that's terrific. Well, Tara, we certainly wish you the best in your transition.
Yeah, absolutely.
And just a reminder, we have Steve for about another 10 minutes, so feel free to put any questions that you have in the chat. We'd love to answer them while you're here and on with us. We do have one, Steve, that comes from Alika, who's on our call. She asks, when a business unit moves to value-based pricing, what type of retooling might sales need to do for value-based selling? And Alika, feel free to pop off the mute at any time if you'd like.
All right. So hi, Alika, good to see you again. So we're transitioning to value-based pricing, which for those of you who aren't familiar with the term, fundamentally it's we're going to charge people what they're willing to pay. And so the whole secret is bringing them back to what are they willing to pay. And what is the biggest kind of retooling we need to do as a part of working with the sales team? I think we have to, and I'm again trying to think of a polite way to put this. A lot of times sales teams are focused on selling features and functions. They talk about features and functions. They compare the features and functions that we have versus the features and functions that others have and our competitors. And if we're going to go to value-based pricing, then we have to reorient them to focus on the problems we solve and the value in the solutions that we have. So the first thing we've got to do in that retooling is explain to the sales team how we bring that value to the market, why the things that we have are valuable to the market, how the market values those things we've placed. Very important to talk about buying criteria, right? These are the things that the buyers are looking at when they're trying to decide whether or not the value we're bringing is, or when they're trying to assess the value that we're bringing to them. So it's all around understanding the problems and how the people in the market value those. It's also very important to understand, and very important for the sales team to understand, that it doesn't matter what we as a vendor value. It doesn't matter what the sales person believes is valuable. It's all about the perception in the market and what do those buyers in the market perceive as the value. And so a big part of our job is creating that perception, and then the salespeople are there to recover that. Also a big part of kind of retooling that value-based selling really comes around to when you have those discount negotiations, right? When they're trying to negotiate that discount, it's all about, oh, you want a discount instead of, oh, you want a discount. It's all about, oh, isn't the price we presented commensurate with the value we're providing to them? So it's taking them back to that value, right? You want a discount, then you're going to have to give me something of value. Maybe I get a case study, or maybe you'll agree to be a reference, assuming all this goes well, or whatever. So it's taking that discussion and changing it from features and functions to what is valued by the market. How do we identify that value? How do we express that value? Right? Again, it's the perceived value in the market. Doesn't matter whether it's real or, perception is reality, especially in that situation.
Great.
Great
Yeah, like
question.
she said great stuff. She took a ton of notes.
Good.
All right, let's do a couple of more, Steve. This one's a little bit of a mouthful, so bear with me. It comes from Andrew, and it looks to be about leadership concerns. So he asks, how can I convince our leadership about the power of product marketing? We're an established company, but have recently launched a product that is, as he'll say, outside of our normal offerings. They seem to feel our pedigree speaks for itself, but we, the product team, know it's important to put marketing efforts before this if we want to differentiate ourselves from our competitors in this space. Any advice when leadership refuses to listen?
Okay, so we're in a situation, we've entered a new market segment with a new product, and we have a good reputation in the markets we're in today, but this new thing is kind of outside of our box, which is why I'm saying it's moving into a new market segment. I'm assuming we're solving a new set of problems. Management feels like we can rely on the reputation we've already built, but it doesn't sound like that reputation actually is valid in this new market segment. Maybe the awareness is not there and so on. So I think the first thing we can do is do an awareness and perception study. That would be my first bit of advice. Go do a awareness and perception survey of the people in that market segment. Identify the people that are going to influence that buying decision. So who are the personas that are impacting that buying decision? And just go do a survey of those folks. Ideally, an anonymous survey. There are, lots of people, companies who provide that. I know lots of services out there that will guarantee you response rates and guarantee you targeting and things like that. But go do that awareness and perception survey. So survey a subset of those people maybe who have the title that you're wanting or in the industry that you want for this new solution. And just see how many of them have heard of you before. And if they have heard of you, maybe you have a list of 5 or 6 different attributes that you think that might be associated with you or you would like to be associated with. And then for those that have heard of you, see how many of them associate you with those qualities that you want to display. And I think if you go do that survey, and if you're in the situation that you've articulated here, what's going to come back is those people in that market don't know who you are, right? That awareness does not exist. And if they do know who you are, they may or may not actually associate you with the concepts that you want to be associated with. Maybe you want to be associated with market leader or easy to implement or great customer support or things like that. You go do that awareness and perception survey. It's going to come back maybe with, it sounds like in this situation, you're not going to have the awareness and the perception may be very different. Then you've got the hard market data. Then you've got the facts. Then you can take to the executive team and say, here you go, right? That this is what's going on. And I suspect your sales team may take one of 2 perspectives there. They're either going to say, see, I told you that they didn't know who we were, or they're going to say, yeah, okay, I know I've been throwing rocks at marketing for not creating the beachhead, but now I see what's going on, right? I have that better understanding. So that annual, we usually do them on an annual basis. Now you can do them. It's easier to do them more frequently. Also, though, in this situation, that establishes that baseline for you that you can start to work from.
I think that's fantastic because it's really, some usable takeaway that he can implement right away. So, Andrew, hopefully that was helpful. Well, we've hit our time. So do we have any last questions from anyone on our call? Feel free to go ahead and put those in the chat now. If not, Steve, thanks so much for taking the time with us. We love having you, lending us your expertise. We want to thank everyone for participating today and give a little shout out to our next product chat. This continues next Tuesday, September 15th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We are welcoming Solo Nawaz. She's an executive coach and biz ops leader, and she'll be doing her discussion on secrets to leading highly effective product teams in a VUCA world. VUCA meaning volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So certainly join us for that. In the meantime, everyone stay well, and thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks, Steve. Bye.
See you guys.